Good evening, friends. My name's Alan. Welcome to my channel. I'll be reviewing Steinbeck's East of Eden this evening. I read it about 20 years ago and really liked it. I read it in jail, as a matter of fact, in Arizona. And it was a type of book that, you really sink your teeth into. I probably read it in a few days. And it just stuck with me. I had read Grapes of Wrath before in school, and Of Mice and Men, and the play, and saw the movie version with Gary Sinise and John Malkovich. I thought that was great. Steinbeck referred to this as his first novel. And so a little background real briefly. Steinbeck was born in 1902 in Salinas, California, where the novel takes place. And the novel was written in 1952. John, they say he saw himself as an outsider and a rebel early on, and that he was a restless and curious child. He saw the invention of refrigeration, railroad cars, and they called lettuce green gold back then in the day, like 1919, when they began to ship lettuce on the railroad throughout the country. And that is mentioned in the book. That plays a part, as does the invention of the automobile. Some funny parts in the novel about that. They say John Steinbeck was an American patriot, although he was denied commission in the armed forces due to the FBI investigated him after Grapes of Wrath and thought he had communist tendencies or communist leanings, suspected. But he wrote a lot of propaganda pieces for the U.S. and the war effort, and in 1943, the New York Herald Tribune hired him to report on the war in Europe. He went to England first, and then to North Africa, where he was in a group, a battalion led by Douglas Fairbanks Jr. So that's kind of interesting. So I just want to, the war and the Army plays a part in the novel, and I wanted to see if Steinbeck saw any real action, and he did. I point out there's a lot of biblical symbolism, analogies, references. The characters' names are probably the obvious ones, like begins with Adam and Charles as brothers. A lot of dichotomies in this book too, like country life, city life, American foreigners, good and evil, of course. That's, and the choice between that's the crux of the novel. The characters' names begin with Adam and Charles are brothers, so we have A and C, Cain and Abel. Then they, Adam has twins and names them Aaron and Cal, A and C again. There's a character, a girl in here who plays a big part. At the end, her name is Abram, and that's only because her father was going to name a boy Abraham. Kathy, a character, is compared to Eve. The number 33 appears not frequently, but periodically in the novel. Jesus Christ was 33 years of age when he was crucified, things like that. This was a buddy read between my father and I. I gave him this for Christmas, and he never read it, and it was a really good book for us to read, and I would recommend fathers and sons read this book, or Father's Day is coming up, in a few months. Be a great gift. Give a set of presents. You can give a memory by doing the buddy read. I got a lot out of it. It's a very readable book. You don't need secondary sources. I had to look up several words, like I continually do with Faulkner and other writers. They use old words, which I love to be turned on to. Now, some have suggested in their criticism of the novel, which I don't think is fair. There's characters in here that are stereotypical. I consider stereotypical Irish depicted, stereotypical Chinese. There's a character, Lee, in here, who is just a beloved character. You really get to know him a little bit. Even towards the very, very, very end, you're still learning things about this character, which I won't disclose here. And I'll leave that to you to find out. I've marked some passages in here. Let me just read a little bit. Still, the critic Louis Gannett found Eden Steinbeck's wisest and richest and happiest book. However, the Christian Science Monitor could not distinguish the wisdom from the monstrosity. His obsession with naked animality, brute violence, and the dark wickedness of the human mind remain so overriding that what there is of beauty and understanding is subordinated and almost extinguished. Time magazine commented that the novel was too blundering and ill-defined to make its stories point. Instead of sticking to the original idea of telling a family history, Steinbeck had tried to merge the double plot and had produced a huge grab bag. The New Yorker snidely dismissed the book as California moonshine. In the most favorable contemporary judgment, Mark Schroer in the New York Times argued that through the exercise of a really remarkable freedom of his rights as a novelist, Mr. Steinbeck weaves in, and more particularly around, the story of prostitution, a phantasia of history and myth that results in a strange and original work of art. Agreed. Poor mistress Kathy Trask and her sexual buccaneering were too much for many readers to take. But in my definition, that equals a big, hard booking classic. The novel has a tone of a wisdom literature, especially with the character Samuel Hamilton, which was John Steinbeck's grandfather. Now, the switches between narration, and it goes into the third person omnipotent narration. I'm going to say John Steinbeck narrating here. He weaves himself into this book. His name, John Steinbeck, is in this book on a family tree. I've mentioned it before, and I found it in several places. I'll show you. Dichotomies. The book is like Grapes of Wrath, alternate chapters between the Hamiltons and the Trusks, between city and country, even between Connecticut and California, east and west. Let me get into the novel itself here. I'm going to bring up a point that I mentioned a few minutes ago about criticisms that I've seen on YouTube about this, that I equate to like people who want to take out the N-word from Faulkner and Hemingway and Harry Crews and others that I am definitely against. I don't believe it's fair to judge literature, classic or not, by today's standards. Now you have a character in here, beloved character named Lee, who talks in pidgin English throughout most of the first part of the novel, and we find out that he knows he's doing it. This isn't a big spoiler. So he's probably the wisest character in the book, Lee. Very covert, level, under all circumstances. Just a great character. But, there's other characters calling him a chink, calling him the Chinese and making, jokes about that. But I think he handles it fairly well because, here, let me just quote. He refers to Indians are dismissed as an inferior breed, while blacks are assigned dark and fatal sex. Now, it's also unfair to say that that's John Steinbeck's view when it's probably coming out of a character's mouth, right? Here's a quote directly from the novel. There is a great safety for a shy man with a whore. For a shy man with a whore. Having been paid for and in advance, she has become a commodity, and a shy man can be gay with her and even brutal to her. Okay, that doesn't sound good or right, does it? But here again, this is another point in the same sentence. She has become a commodity, and a shy man can be gay with her, and even da-da-da. Now, of course he doesn't mean a shy man could be homosexual with her. He means a shy man can be gay, fancy-free. But it's not cool that he can also be even brutal to her. It's true, but it happens, It's called verisimilitude, isn't it? A writer will use intense, real-life situations and examples. I just got done reading Marlon James's Black Leopard, Red Wolf, and that's really, I'll be thinking about that novel for some time. We'll be forgetting it soon. Back to East of Eden. Steinbeck, I really liked how he, I use the term breaking the fourth wall. That's a theater term, if anybody doesn't know. Shakespeare does it all the time with the sides and, speaking directly to the audience. Now, that happens when a writer will break the fourth wall, a narrator will switch to first person or, third person narrator. But here he switched to first person who is all-knowing with details. When I said Kathy was a monster, it seemed to me that it was so. Now that I have bent close with a glass over the small print of her and reread the footnotes, and I wonder if it was true. Okay, then he gets into the description. Her breasts did not grow and her nipples did not darken. There was no quickening of milk glands, no physical planning to feed the newborn. He's talking about her pregnancy that she doesn't want. But the narrator has, how does he know these details about her darkening nipples and blah blah? It's when before, the chapter before, it wasn't in first person. Now my father didn't notice these things. He's just reading the book for pleasure. Lee is the one who is the scholar, and in the middle of the book, almost smack dab in the middle, on page 303, the book is 602 pages long, Samuel said, "It's a fantastic story. I've tried to follow it. Maybe I've missed somewhere. Why is this word so important?" And the word is a Hebrew word, timshel. It means thou mayest. That we have a choice. Lee's point is, he's reading the King James Bible, and it says thou shalt not. You must do this, you must do that. The Hebrew word is thou mayest. For if thou mayest, it is also true that thou mayest not. Don't you see? Why, that makes a man great. That gives him stature with the gods. For in his weakness, and his filth, and his murder of his brother, he still has the great choice. He can choose his course, and fight it through, and win. He's also a functioning opium eater. He takes 2 pipes in the afternoon, no more, no less, just like the elders. That's not a spoiler either. So, I could go on. Let me just check my little annotations here, see if there's anything else. It's a very funny novel, too. Pardon me. Just a lot of surprises happen. It gets criticized for not having much of a plot, which I disagree with. It has many plots, several plots. But it does take, it's character driven too. I would say it's more character than plot driven. But there are definitely several surprises that hit you. If you're like me, I wasn't prepared for them, which is a sign of great writing. Now here's where I was said in the beginning, I'll close with this perhaps, that John Steinbeck writes himself into the novel. It happens on 5/16, and it happens again too, but he's talking about troops in France. The war years were wet years, and there were many people who blamed the strange weather on the firing of the great guns in France. We didn't have many troops in France that first winter, but we had millions in training getting ready to go. Here we go. He's talking about a German person in Salinas, Mr. Frankel, and John and his sister harassed him a little. You know, they were kids. My little sister and I did our part with Mr. Frankel, and it is one of these memories of shame that still makes me break into a sweat and tighten up around my throat. We were standing in our front yard on the lawn one evening, and we saw him coming up with little fat steps. His black Humber was brushed and squarely set on his head. I don't remember if we discussed our plans, but we must have, to have carried it out so well. As he came near, my sister and I moved slowly across the street side by side. Mr. Frankel looked up and saw us moving toward him. We stepped in the gutter as he came by. He broke into a smile and said, "Good evening, John. Good evening, Mary." We stood stiffly side by side, and we said in unison, "Hoch der Kaiser." I can see it in his face now. He startled in his startled, innocent blue eyes. He tried to say something, and then he began to cry. He didn't even try to pretend he wasn't. He just stood there sobbing. And do you know, Mary and I turned around and walked stiffly across the street into our front yard. We felt horrible. I still do when I think about it. So, is the omni narrator John Steinbeck himself? I think so. Tim Scholl, we have a choice to act good or to act evil, to react good or to react evil. I like to have a lot of 10 seconds back in my life. I don't know about you, but even if we have to fight it sometimes and practice sometimes, we do have a choice. So, East of Eden, highly recommended. Next up, I'll be reviewing the book of Monel, stuck with me for months, this book. This thin, tiny book by Marcel Schwab. And after that, we'll be on to Dubliners and all things Dublin. Hopefully somebody will do a video on the Abbey Theatre and Yeats and Lady Gregory. And if not, I think I will. So thank you for your time and consideration, and I hope you'll take part in hashtag Dubliners 2019. You consider yourself personally invited. Thank you.